Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. You're all very welcome to today's webinar. My name is Chris Johnson. I'm going to be your host today. We're going to be focusing on how you can turn your Net Promoter Score to your next predictor of customer satisfaction, ultimately looking to help you to retain your customers in 2023. So as we're getting started, wouldn't mind giving a quick shout out to everyone who's attending. If you can let me know in the chat where in the world you're joining from. This is purely to get you to understand where the chat is. Today's session is meant to be practical, meant to be a two-way conversation if possible, for you to get as much value as possible. So I'm joining all the way from Ireland in today, and we can see that it lit up there. So usually I can say that that our friends from America. So Brenda was first on the dial. Well done, Brenda. She's joined from the US. We've got Valerie from Miami. Sounds like a beautiful part of the world. We've got Mark from Canada. You're very welcome. Some people from Canada. Madison, Kansas City, Amanda, you're very welcome. South Central, Wisconsin, and that's Devon, Rebecca in San Diego. So you're all very welcome. And really that's, as you're hearing the content today, please let me know. Helen from Vancouver, and friends joining from Germany. So all over the world. And as I say, you're all very, very welcome. If you didn't catch, my name is Chris Johnson, and really today we have three goals. Ultimately, if you haven't started your customer employee experience centricity journey, today's really to kind of help you with that, to give you a kickstart. And if you haven't, don't worry, not to worry. We're going to give you a turbo boost, empower you to make a difference. And then whoever stays to the end will get a present. So that's something to look out for as you stay. So the presentation today is in two parts. I'm going to keep it super, super practical. I'm going to start with some real world examples first, and then we can get into more explanatory overview as well. Just while you're joining, I've got a poll here, just to understand what your priorities are, just so that your CX peers can understand some of the challenges that you're grappling with. So it's trying to work out, what's the big challenge. I'm hearing a lot about monetization of NPS, the ability to connect NPS to a dollar value. I'd love to hear if that's a key challenge for you. Some people, there are challenges all around storytelling, so going beyond word clouds and sentiment analysis to more impactful insights. Ultimately understanding drivers' NPS. But we can see, like, really quickly, nearly 50% are saying that the biggest challenge this year is connecting their CX improvements to business metrics. And the reason why we put this poll together is to kind of validate what we're hearing. So in this environment, you need to be able to justify the ROI in your business case. We call it returning on improvements. So the ROI for improving the customer experience needs to be kind of metric led and business impact led. I'll just share the results so that you see these. But you can see that 40% of people are saying that they need to connect CX to business metrics. 23% understand the driver's NPS or CSAT. 21% improving NPS. Everyone's happy with their VOC, so you're getting really good value, or it's not a priority for you this year. And 16% are wanting to get better storytelling with better insights. So that's just kind of level set. So your CX peers are sharing your challenges here with you today. And the idea is that today's discussion leaves you with some insights, some practical suggestions. So yeah, I'll just very quickly share those results so you can see them. They'll flash up on screen, just summarizing what we just discussed there. At any point, use Q&A from what you hear. pose any questions, I'll share them with your CX peers as well. So just by way of introduction, my name is Chris Johnson. I'm the CEO of Fedora Board, and we quantify human emotion. And from that, we create what we call predictive insights. And our customers from Amazon, Allstate, TikTok, a whole range of other companies use that to create better business outcomes. And what we focus on is this idea of unifying the experience. So customer doesn't really care if it's customer or employee experience. They're thinking about how they're treated and the overall experience for them. So it's really important that you think about how you quantify the viewpoint of the customer. We do that, and we advocate for emotion. And the second point is that ultimately you're trying to make decisions, prioritize that through predictive AI. Just for context, we're a Gartner Cool vendor in customer analytics using AI, and we're also best practice in Forrester for employee experience. So just a super quick overview. So the challenge that we solve is that a lot of people are trying to unify the link between the metric and the verbatim. And the key challenge for a lot of people is that they're manually going through the verbatims. So we provide a technology that automates this by going through a whole pile of data really, really quickly. And from that, we can auto-generate themes to link to an emotional intensity. And then with that, we can then generate predictive insights. So we can give you an overview of how you're performing, and then we'll predict if you solve certain issues, what impact that will have for your bottom line. And this example, just to give you a super high level example, is for Starbucks. So we'll take the unstructured data and give you a structured metric. We'll correlate that to your North Star metrics, so you're not introducing kind of new fancy ideas or metrics into your organization. And then you can see the third insight here is obviously people hate waiting in Starbucks queues. They want to use the mobile app. It's driving 4% of the conversations. So that's the context. So 4% of their customers are talking about the mobile app. And the additional insight is that 14%, it's driving 14% more sadness compared to any other driver in the analysis. And you can see if they were to fix the mobile app, that would drive the NPS by 1%. So when you're starting to think about the monetization of NPS, you then start to work out, well, what does a 1% increase in an NPS look like? And then you're able to then do a very quick ROI. So for Starbucks, we're presenting a 13% increase in NPS. Each NPS percentage is worth $4 million. And you can understand a update to a mobile app might only cost $500,000. So you can see it's a really clear, strong ROI case to go fix the mobile app for their customers, because that will drive a lifetime value to their customer base. So the key challenge we're going to talk today about is the challenge around NPS. And the beauty about NPS is it's trying to do two things. So it's trying to combine qual and quant together. So it's trying to give you a rating on a scale of 0 to 10 or 1 to 10. It's then capturing the comments. So it would be great if NPS could tell you the what and the why from the score. But the challenge is that to bring those two things together, you ultimately need to go through the comments. So we talk about this idea of crossing the NPS chasm. So that chasm is linking what has happened to why, and the why will then give you the prediction as to how you should prioritize your insight going forward. So the organizations that think about the unstructured data in their organization, that will turn into a competitive advantage. So the ones that figure out how to use this to their advantage will gain a competitive advantage. Deloitte Digital estimates that the majority of the data that organizations hold today is unstructured. A large part of that is unstructured text data, which is the comments that you're collecting from online chat or your surveys or online reviews or whatever that happens to be. So it's really kind of painting the challenge that what I'm not saying is to throw out NPS. What we're trying to do is we're trying to work with a metric that's largely accepted by your C-level peers. And for a lot of you, your bonus for the next year is linked into that. So today is not really going to be explaining what NPS is or rehashing the pros and cons of it. It's actually trying to work out at its intention. NPS is trying to do two things, and the shortfall is it's only doing one thing really well, and we often just rely on the number. The opportunity here is to unify the comments and the numbers to get more of a predictive prioritization for your decisions. So hopefully you all agree with that and think about that as a core challenge for you in your organization today. So, and I can see, thank you so much, Jean, for the Q&A. I'll wait for a few more and then we'll go through this in a bit of detail. So given that there's all of this data in your organization, how on earth do you go about analyzing that? And what I'm going to do is just give you a very peppered high-level summary of how technology has evolved to solve this challenge. So, and just for context, we're a spin out of Queen's University here in Ireland, which is one of the world's leader in emotion AI. And AI is something that's being popularized. Everyone's talking about chat GDP, and that's kind of on everyone's lips at the moment. It's certainly been popularized by open AI. But if we're to kind of look back, that the first kind of iteration of text analytics and certainly edging towards artificial intelligence was in the 1950s, when a researcher for IBM created this keyword and context indexing, which essentially was keyword retrieval. So the ability to retrieve keywords from a whole pile of documents. And that led to a whole industry. So, from 2000 onwards, we had this whole concept of sentiment analysis, which is positive, negative, or neutral. Whole idea was to try and form some form of customer opinions from all of the customer data that you're getting. And similar to NPS, sentiment is redundant. And so, if you're presenting the word cloud to your C-level colleagues and showing sentiment based on green and red and blue for neutral, it's kind of so what. You'll get the so what question, which is, I'm seeing a bunch of words here, can you tell me what decision that will impact, or what do I do next? So the next generation of text analytics is around this concept of emotion AI, which is really about building knowledge from the data. So as the data is input, that ultimately it will generate narratives, and those narratives can form into stories. And you can see that we're moving from this idea of just processing the data to more of an understanding and generation. So the open AI approach is natural language generation. And I often, sat down and spoke to one of the smartest researchers in this field at Queen's University. And I said, well, what's your whole view of AI? And they provided a really good answer, which is AI is almost intelligent. And their view was that AI will be a facilitative technology. So that's the context that I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence today, as a facilitative technology to enable you to hit a business goal and objective. So that's just to give you a bit of context. And ultimately, where we're trying to go from is your status quo today. And if we're to kind of look at that, you are potentially viewing your customers as a number rather than as people. So we want to move from this kind of black and white view of customer to a high definition. We want to go past sentiment analysis to think about the emotional intensity that our customers are expressing. We want to go from word clouds, from a data visualization, storytelling to understanding. And ultimately, we want to then think about our customers not as numbers, but as people. So there's three ways that you can do that. And I'm going to give you some practical examples, and then we'll pause. So the first action that you can take, and I've kept these super practical, is keep the NPS metric and keep the question, but use predictive insights. So I'm going to take you through a couple of examples from one of the world's leading corporates that are leveraging Adobe Board to maximize the business impact that you can get for NPS. I'm going to show you how you can keep the metric, but change how you think about asking the question to capture more verbatim, to ultimately to give you a richer insight. And then I'm going to give you some examples about how you can get rid of the metric and change the question. And we're seeing actually a lot of organizations aligned to the business outcome. So actually thinking about the metric question aligned to a future behavior, because a lot of the data that you have captured is retrospective. It's talking about, you know, past behaviors, past experiences. We're seeing a shift towards, you know, what is the future behaviors as it relates to your business objectives, and notably that's around retention. I'm maybe just going to pause there for a second, just to acknowledge, you know, a number of questions have come through. So yeah, so one question's around trying to equate the NPS to a dollar value. How do you derive that? Another one is Adobe Board software automatically generates topics. How much manual tweaking do these models require? Do the models use Boolean logic? And then the next one is clustering of topics, 3 decision-ready insights. How does that work in a multilingual environment? So they're great questions. I'm going to go through a couple of examples, and then I'll go into the platform just to give you a sense of answering them in real time. So hopefully that'll help everyone. Okay, so let's get started. So the first example is for one of the largest private hospitals in the world, Healthscope. They are based in Australia. They use Qualtrics to capture between 7,000 to 8,000 survey responses a month, so quite a lot of data. And their challenge is to ultimately connect those insights to the frontline workers. So how can you give an insight to a frontline worker, i.e. a nurse, a doctor, to actually improve the customer stroke patient experience? So that's what we're going to look at now as a quick example. So this was for Healthscope. So they pulled all the data that they're capturing in real time, integrating into Adobe Board. They identified that blood pressure cuffs was driving 88% more anger for their patients and reducing trust by 33%. And this really surprised the head of customer experience, because he automatically thought it was the machines. So there's an issue with the machines. We need to get maintenance in to actually identify what that was. But actual fact, the Adobe Board analysis generated the topic around ill-fitting blood pressure cuffs. So essentially, they were fitting the blood pressure cuffs. If they're put on too tightly, essentially every time it takes a monitor, it's giving you a punch in the arm, essentially. So you had a lot of elderly patients complaining about, you know, bruising on their arm as they were leaving the hospital. And the other challenge was that as blood pressure was being taken during the night, you were essentially being woken up with a dig in the arm, which wasn't all that pleasant. So that was just to give you an idea of some of the challenges. Hopefully you can see my screen. Just notice that someone has come on. So just want to make sure that you can see my screen there. So by addressing the issue of ill-fitting blood pressure cuffs through training, they were able to predict that would improve their NPS by 18%. And you can see the verbatims, you know, to illustrate the point. You know, I had enough pain in my arm, bruising when I got home, but to my response, even with tears in my eyes, the nurses were saying some people do find it uncomfortable. And you can see the patient is trying to, you know, communicate the challenge with this but not succeeding. So actually translating that to an emotion and then predicting, okay, this is one of the 5 key things that you need to take care of, that really drove an action from the hospital. And the head of CX at the time, a gentleman named Jeffrey, I'm just going to play you just a quick extract of how he used the door board.
We average about 7,000 plus survey responses a month, and 90% of those will have a comment. Some of them are a Jane Austen novel, and a large portion of them are there. And within that novel is just golden nuggets of truth that are really hard for us to find and make sense of. And so we use a door board to support us with really understanding the emotional context behind what our patients are telling us, so we can understand what's important to them.
So that's just to give you a quick sense of how they use
We average about 7,000 plus.
And just in terms of how they value the nuance of understanding emotion.
We're human beings looking after human beings, and human beings are emotional things. We're emotional beings. We're purely driven by emotion. We pretend we're not, but we are. And so to make that connection for frontline staff, we found it was incredibly powerful to share with them data in those words, and then be able to show them little snippets of a comment that drove that emotional feeling of us or disgust or ecstasy.
So the key point that Jeffrey was making is that, you know, often he was telling the frontline workers, you know, we're getting an NPS of 3 to 5 driven by these issues. But when he was able to communicate that, you know, the blood pressure cuffs are reducing trust, patient trust, by nearly a quarter. And if we actually fix this, guys, that will drive the patient experience by 18%. It really galvanized the execution of the action. That they were able to prioritize it. They were able to kind of test before they invested in the training to understand what the impact was. And then ultimately they were able to then tell that through the narratives from the actual patients themselves. So hopefully that gives you a quick example of how you can use your NPS in the current setup without any changes, but use predictive AI to help you with that as well. The second example is from Allstate. You'll all be aware Allstate is one of the largest insurance companies in the world, 16 million customers in the US alone. And they've been working with a door board for the last 4 years. And one of the challenges that their service team have is that typically they're getting all this data through in real time and through various means and methods. But ultimately it was kind of conveying into a large blob of nothingness, because it was very difficult to actually analyze. And with the door board, we were able to, they were able to identify 3 pillars that they could take action on. And they were around their people, their technology, and process. So the example
human beings
that I'm going to show you is for their app. And if you're familiar with any of the insurance companies, a lot of them have a mobile app that will track how well you're driving. And the door board analysis was able to process all of the feedback from this app that they were getting through their support desks. And they were able to identify that there was challenges with the app, that it was actually not recording the trips. Now that's a big problem for the customers, because their insurance premiums were being auto-tuned depending on how well they drove. So if you drive safely, you know, you get a lower premium. If you drive, you know, in a more reckless way, your premiums go up. So you can imagine that customers were getting these policies bills and, you know, accepting that they're driving really well, but not really impacting their policies, and actually the policy pricing varying. And you can see here from the emotional analysis that was able to predict that if they solved that issue, because it was driving 55% more anger compared to any other driver, that they would improve their CSAT score by 17%. With the improvements that they took, they were able to increase trust in the actual application by nearly 10%. Importantly, they were able to reduce the volume of demand coming into their service desk because people weren't reporting the issue of missing trips. And the actual realized value was 16.6% increase in their CSAT score. So you can see that the business conversation that you would have to have internally to kind of advocate for improvements, that you can then start to have a very business-like conversation to say, okay, if we take this action, it's going to improve CSAT, and this will impact the lifetime value of our customers by X million. So very, very simple ROI case. So the next example is to actually keep the metric and to change the questions, and we're staying with Allstate. And Allstate pioneered the use of memory writing, which is an approach, so using a metric such as NPS, but changing how they capture the questions. So memory writing, as the name suggests, tries to get the writer to journal, to evoke memories, and memories encode emotion. So the idea of the recall is that you're recalling based on the most important information relating to different emotions and different experiences as they occur. So this was a survey measuring the experience of the customer experience of people coming into the organization. So Allstate have a big target to increase productivity, to hire the best. And they use memory writing to understand across the journey of 90 days what it's like. And they could identify from the verbatims using Emotion AI that it was driving 52% less trust. And the reason for that was that on the last 10 days of the onboarding, they started opening all these peer-to-peer learning, online training courses, and the whole range of other things. And what they found is by flipping the 10 days to give new employees that in the first 10 days, they were actually able to reduce the onboarding time by 20%. And this is something that Forrester picked up on in terms of a best practice beyond surveys. So rethinking how you can capture data and to really get your customers or employees to think in a different way. A lot of questions coming through. Victoria posed a really good question about how trust is measured. There's a range of other questions. I will come to them, so please keep them coming. And the idea is that one question will link to the other, and you'll get all that value at once, rather than me kind of potentially miss a question as we're going through it. So thanks so much for doing that. So then this is where it gets really exciting, where you rethink the metric and change the question. So the example here is for Microsoft. So they, during COVID, were delivering a lot of customer support globally. And ultimately, they're trying to improve the customer experience through their people who are now find themselves working at home. So instead of asking an NPS or any other metric CSAT question, they asked their customer support agents, how confident are you in maintaining customer support during COVID? And that allowed them to assess the confidence levels across all of their team in delivering customer experience. And the one open-ended question was around the barriers to confidence at home and at work. And what was really interesting was that they could start to identify, challenges around mental health, around family safety, around internet connectivity, all the kind of the basics for office setup that would impact the confidence of their CX professionals to deliver a great customer experience. And from that, they were able to predict that they could increase confidence to maintain customer service by tackling these two issues. So again, helping you to prioritize those predictions and understand how to improve them. So I'm going to just conclude with one final question, and then we'll take a pause, and then we'll get into more practical examples. So the next one is where you use unsolicited feedback. So a lot of the feedback that you're getting today is solicited, i.e. you are asking your customer to give you feedback. Unsolicited feedback is unstructured text that the companies haven't asked for, but exists in the wild. So that tends to be on your customer support handles. It could be, Trustpilot. It could be any amount of online sources and reviews that are impacting your organization. So with all that data, the challenge is to kind of combine that to get a 360 view of your customer, to take all this unsolicited feedback and combine it with your solicited survey feedback. So they were taking quite a volume of data, and moving it from Clarabridge, Brandwatch through to Adobe Board, and using Adobe Board's technology, they could see that anger and rage was emanating from the changing rooms, and they're all scratching their heads going, what on earth is happening in those changing rooms? And they could see it was linked to lighting and mirrors. And this was, a big surprise, because they're going, what on earth is happening there? And suddenly they started to realize when they read the verbatims, because the verbatims were saying, your lighting and mirrors are like cellulite detection devices from outer space. So people were going into the changing rooms and getting a fright because the mirrors were so real and the lighting was so severe. And in actual fact, we saw posts of muscle men going into the changing rooms and using the lighting in the mirrors to take Instagram photos, because it kind of showed off the precise detail of the concurves of their muscles. But for the average Joe like me, I'm straight out of there like a scalded cat. So you can imagine people who were going to purchase their clothing from this retailer, suddenly being faced by the reality of this unflattering viewpoint of themselves, and obviously abandoning the purchase. This was a big surprise to the board of this global retailer. The reason being is that they just invested millions of pounds upgrading their changing rooms and stores globally to include these kind of funky unisex changing rooms. And the key takeaway was that by changing the lighting and changing the mirrors, that they could impact the reduce churn at changing rooms by 25%. So that's just to give you a quick idea of how you can use solicited and unsolicited feedback. So I'm going to pause here for a second, because we're very quickly approaching time. So we've been going for 30 minutes. So I promised the prize at the end. So I'm just going to quickly give you that and share that with you, and then we can continue on. I'll do a time check and we'll run for another 15 minutes. So for everyone attending today, you will get 3 decision-ready insights on your brand. So we will take online data and present 3 predictions that will help you prioritize what decisions you make to improve customer experience today. So you will get a call, if you haven't, from my colleagues at Adobe Board, who'll be booking in your time. So please bear with us as we just go through the analysis. This can be based on your online data, or you could just send 1,000 rows of anonymous data as well. So I just want to pause there for a second and maybe just very quickly show you how the technology works in practice, and then we'll go into more examples. So just to kind of emphasize the point that the reason why we focus on the unstructured text is because within that you have the ability to extract emotion. And the reason why emotion is important is that 80% of your customers' decisions are driven by how they feel. So we're suddenly going from thinking about your customer as an NPS score, which is very depersonalized, to actually trying to think about them as people using emotion. And with that, we're actually making the whole concept of sentiment analysis redundant. So there's 3 very quick takeaways about emotion that I'm going to introduce. This is based on a practical theory called Plutchik's Wheel of Emotion. And we've kind of lent on this from Queen's University, who are one of the world's leaders in emotion AI, who contributed to the W3 standards in definition of measurement of emotion online. So the first one is that sentiment is redundant because emotion is attribute based, and the idea here is, you know, if I was to take my mobile phone here, love taking photos, recording the kids, but actually hit the battery in the charger. So for you to make decisions on your customer, you need to understand the emotional intensity based on the contributing factors of that. The great news for you is that emotions are opposite. So if you understand that people are really annoyed by the charger, you can actually design a new experience to drive them to a new emotional outcome. And then finally, emotions drive behavior. So emotional intensity goes from low to medium to high. That can be positive, from acceptance to trust to admiration, or from your perspective, you want to arrest the experience at the annoyance phase before people go vote with their feet. So that's just to give you a quick idea of understanding how you can quantify emotion, why that's important. Now, I'm going to give you a really simple framework as to how you can reach these predictive insights. First step is to integrate the data from touch point back rather than from channel to customer. So it's getting you to think more broadly about solicited and unsolicited feedback. Second is to prioritize that based on the emotional intensity. And then finally, you want to make a decision and drive a business impact. So when you're thinking about all the data, you can certainly incorporate that from surveys, and we partner with Qualtrics. 65% of our customers are Qualtrics users. Some of them use Medallia and other good providers out there. But the idea is to think about, you've got Zendesk tickets, you've got social media commentary, you've got exit interviews with your customers that you can possibly incorporate as well. So the idea here is that we need a kind of root cause analysis approach to allow you to get to a specific item level. So we'll give you a directional score to a specific emotional index, to a specific emotion like trust, to an item level. So the example here is for Apple, and you're probably going, well, what on earth is wrong with Apple? So we can certainly look at some of the great things they're doing. The Genius Bar, for example, is driving joy, and you can see people really love the experience they get from Apple employees. Doesn't really explain the anger. So weirdly, people hate getting emoji keyboard updates when they just want the battery and the charger fixed. So this is kind of allowing you to go from a score to a specific driver to an action. And with this here, you will then get a automatic scorecard. So the AI is almost writing what you would typically have to do for your C-level peers. So you will get a directional score on an index of -100 to +100. We can break that down further into the emotional indexes. We can then correlate that to your NPS. And then we can use predictive AI to essentially model, if you were to remove the mobile app from the data set, what impact that would have on the score. And we can see that it'll generate up to 10 different predictions. So I'm just going to show you our kind of algorithm, or the way we think about this. So we often talk about drivers. So if you're to look at the third insight, the driver, or the topic in this case, is product temperature. The context for the driver is that 4% of their customers are talking about product temperature. The insight is that 15%, it's driving 15% more sadness compared to, poor customer service or the mobile app or whatever. And you can see if they were to train the baristas to hand over the coffee quicker, or to change the thermostats, that would drive the NPS by 1%. And you can see the story that we're telling here is that no one loves a cold hot chocolate. So that's just the idea of going to a more prescriptive insight. I just want to go to the questions here. So very quickly, will you be sharing the materials? So you get a recording, and there's a whole pile of goodies that you'll get in follow up to the webinar. 80% rule, does that apply to complex B2B? So this is based on human decision making. So it's more about decision making rather than context. So it's how humans make decisions. So that is 80%. Harvard published research that indicates it's as up to 95%. we use logic to justify our decisions that we make emotionally. So another question is the analytics based on text analytics? Primarily, yes, but that data can be voice, and a lot of great technologies that translate voice to text. It could be multilingual, all of the rest. Just another question there from David about getting the access to the platform. So I'm now going to go into the Q&A, but if you've joined late, you know, for all of you who've been very kind with your time, we're giving you a 3 decision-ready insights. That will give you 3 predictions based on the performance of your brand, either from online data that we will take and present to you, or you can share 1,000 rows of anonymous survey data. So I'm going to very quickly go through how the platform works, super quick, because I know it's going to answer a whole pile of questions, right? So the first question is, how do you get the data in, right? So we give you a one-click step with Qualtrics, or you can just drag and drop the data in, or you can take the data from other sources. So the value prop here, if I was just to very quickly show you, is that I can click any of the data sets here. We're going to pick ASOS, which is an online retailer. And it will automatically create a whole pile of slides. So it'll give me an overall score based on analyzing over 900 comments. It will then tell me that 3 predictions. So it's telling me that their chat service is really poor. And if they fix that, that would drive their customer rating by 2%. You can see that their response times are not great. You can see a whole range of drivers there as well. So that's the idea of getting the predictions. And you can see that we can then record an action against that as well. So that's just to give you an idea of how the analysis comes together. So with that there, you can obviously get the 3 insights, and we can do it for any brand online. So you can see there's challenges here around waiting, transfer, or hanging up. And you can see the challenges with delivery service and all the rest. So with that there, we can then create a further 2 slides with automatic SWOT analysis. So SWOT being strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. As I hover over this, it will then create the insight, and then you will get the slides that will auto-generate here as well. So that's just to give you a sense of the key insights that you can derive from the analysis. And with that there, you can then compare. So I can compare North Face to Hugo Boss. I can see they're fairly similar in the emotional experience they're delivering. And I can compare like for like the key drivers that both the brands are delivering. So that's just to give you a quick idea of the type of analysis that can be generated. So I'm just going to go straight to the Q&A. So the first question was around how the analysis is actually generated. So I'm just going to introduce a very quick idea around categorization of data and exploratory analysis. So categorization of data is where you have to train the model. You actually typically use Boolean logic or a technique called bag of words. And the idea is if that concept or keyword exists in the data, it will do the display of that particular comment. So the challenge with that is it's very brittle. So if the keyword doesn't exist, you will not get it. A lot of our customers find that they then have to revert to manual analysis. So that's very time consuming, inaccurate, lacks depth of understanding. Exploratory analysis is where you don't necessarily know what the drivers are, and you use automatic theme detection to ultimately understand what those drivers are. And then you can create the model on the fly once you kind of validate the drivers. So a lot of the tools, you know, TextIQ, Clarabridge, and some of these other tools are using that categorization model. And where Adore Board, where they choose to upgrade their analysis with Adore Board, they're ultimately choosing a exploratory analysis and going beyond sentiment analysis. So hopefully that answers your question. So I just want to, I'm very quickly checking. So Gina asked about, can you adapt these models on the fly? We talk about triage, so the ability to triage the data while your coffee's cooling. So you should be able to add some additional business context. A lot of our customers would have specific lingo that they're wanting to use that's only relevant to their internal audience. So they might want to rename or merge certain drivers. And we have an ability to remember that. So learn that on the fly and carry that forward. The other question is around, how's your topic model identify new and emerging topics? So every time you load a new data set in, it will then perform that exploratory analysis. You can switch on memory where it will take the existing drivers and add that on and then give you those emerging themes as well. One of the questions here is, you mentioned earlier point, NPS is equal to 4 million. How was that derived? So you'll all be aware of lifetime value. Typically, your customers would spend on average X dollars per year. And then typically you will have an average lifetime of that customer. So that could be 3 years, it could be 4 years. If you're drinking Starbucks, that could be 10 years, there's no reason to switch. So ultimately you can then get $1 lifetime value for one customer, and you can obviously multiply that by the number of customers that you have. So the analysis is ultimately the end to understand on average and predict against that average what a 1% increase on your NPS would be. So that's just to give you an example. So we're modeling an NPS improvement, and then we're saying what that dollar value would be. So hopefully that answers your question. Apologize for asking the questions, Faith, you don't need to apologize. How is Adore Board different than Qualtrics in terms of the core differences? So Qualtrics, and we're a big advocate for Qualtrics. As I say, 65% of our customers are already Qualtrics customers. So typically the use case for Qualtrics is that you would use your closed questions to generate the dashboard analysis. And typically what we're finding is that, going back to that idea of categorization, that to get new emerging and I suppose additive themes that people who use in TextIQ eventually have to manually go through it. So obviously you want to save time to do that. So Adore Board eliminates the manual analysis and then is then predicting, okay, if you take this action, this is going to be the impact on NPS and CSAT. So hopefully, Faith, that gives you an idea of the insight. How accurate are the predictions? How do you validate the lift in action taken? So the key acid test is the fact that Allstate, when we predicted a 17% increase, they got a 16.6% increase. A whole pile of customers who are, making decisions and then validating those predictions in the wise. So that just to answer that question. In terms of how the predictions work, so in the correlation model on the dashboard, we're using statistical correlations to link the emotions to the NPS. And then we're using predictive modeling to essentially eliminate the driver to then give, model what the highest potential score would be. So we're acting as if that negative driver or the driver that's eroding trust no longer exists in the data set. And then we're modeling, okay, that would increase your NPS by X%. Similarly, it's not all about resolving issues. You want to build on the things that are working well. So we will also identify, what are the drivers of trust and joy to then help you understand how you would build on them. So Stephanie asked great questions. How reliable is Emotion AI using smaller data sets? So I'll just very quickly, because with time, show you how the analysis works in the background, just to show you that you don't need a large data set. The example that I use for Allstate, relied on, 100 different survey returns. So they're recruiting 100 people on a regular basis, and not a lot of data. The beauty of small data is obviously, you've got a stronger signal to noise based on that unsolicited feedback that you would get from social media. So obviously, the larger the data set from a validation point of view is always more helpful, but as I show now, it doesn't really matter from our perspective. So I'm just going to very quickly, and this is our internal tool, I'm going to very quickly show you how the technology works. So I'm going to write a sentence: I love the service, but hate the food. And I'm going to use emoticons. So you'll find that your customers will not write in the way that you want them to. So our system will obviously crunch through that and give you a score, and then it'll start to work out the emotions. And then ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to work out the semantic meaning within the text. So it will, for example, if I was to put different emojis here, it will then work out what is the actual meaning of that. So you can see it's identified that the emoji was wink, and it's related to expressing interest in the emotion. So the idea here is that you can obviously change the context, and that will change the actual scoring itself. So if you'd see it's got more negative as a sentence. So our technology is working at a document level, paragraph level, sentence level, and then at a semantic level to understand what that is. So that's typically, hopefully answers that question. Jane answers a great question. Do you use in conjunction with Qualtrics and XM Discover, or used separately? So typically we're either used, because TextIQ will probably come with your subscription. So our customers are upgrading with Adobe Board to use our platform. So they're taking the capture of data from Qualtrics and integrating it into Adobe Board. Often the use case for XM Discover is actually from a contact center workflow management perspective. So XM Discover can live independently from Adobe Board, or used in a collaborative way. So other ways to leverage this: to look at customer service rep transcripts instead of just surveys. Yes, 100%. So examples that we've done with Allstate was looking at web chat data, and the example was that people were phoning into the contact centers and expressing anger and rage around knowledge. Essentially, agents trying to close insurance deals and not getting the insights. The automatic theme analysis then created the training program to actually improve the agent's knowledge, but then ultimately improved the CSAT and increased resolved issues by 3%. So that's just to give you an idea of how it can be used for transcripts. Another question around is the decision ready insights a methodology software or consultancy service from Adobe Board. So Adobe Board is a technology software company. What I've just shown you is a three-step process to get to predictive insights. And so typically the steps you would take are integrate the data and getting you to think about all the data that exists in your organization, to go from touch point back rather than from channel. The second step is to understand the drivers of emotion, and then use that to predict what improvements that you should actually improve. And then finally, Mark asked a great question: is this a self-serve model, or do you work hands-on with brands? So we're a self-serve model. We have the Adobe Board Academy that will get you to your first milestone, which would be to share the insights with your teams in the quickest possible time. So yeah, that's hopefully that makes sense. So just to kind of wrap up there, to thank you for attending. There's a couple of other questions I'll definitely get back to. Barry, thanks so much for your questions as well. Have you implemented an earned revenue growth approach? David, I'll come back on that as well. But all I have to do is to thank you for your patience. Great questions. Hopefully you found today valuable. You will get a follow-up from one of my colleagues. So if you hear an Irish accent, you'll know it's a Dole board from my colleagues, Andrew, Gerard, Dylan, and a range of the other team members, Carl, and some of the others. And please bear with them, because we're trying to obviously get through quite a number of people who've signed up today. So all I have to do is thank you again. Appreciate your time. You'll get a recording shortly. So thanks again. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.